Good morning, Noblesville. How's everybody doing? It is Tuesday. We're going to have some Mental Health Monday on a Tuesday. Furthermore, I'm in my bedroom. So welcome to my in-home studio. Kristen has this fancy in-home studio with a beautiful flower over her back. I have bedding and stuff all around here. So we are shifting to a Tuesday. Yesterday was President's Day. We are so glad that you're joining us this morning on Mental Health Monday on Tuesday, February 16th, 2021. It's also a snow day in Noblesville, so there's a lot going on. And I told Kristen before we started, this is real life here this morning. So my beautiful bride, Julie Jenson's right below me, one floor down, teaching online kindergarten. So if you hear some singing in the background, just know that's just Julie. We're just moving things forward. We have 3 little kids running around, a hamster, 3 dogs, so that's just the way it's going to be. So yeah, that's real life, right, Kristen?
Absolutely. This is how we roll. We're going to make it real because this is real. This is how we're seeing behind the scenes.
Yeah, some of the things that you log on to learn about your stresses, we live them too. So I'm so appreciative that all of you have joined us here this morning. I'm always so glad to be joined by my friend, my partner in crime, somebody who inspires me, who has given so much of her time to the city of Noblesville, owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling in Noblesville, Kristen Boice. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. I'm happy to be here with you today.
So glad to have you. So we have a lot of topics to cover here this morning. We're in the month of February. Kristen and I were talking beforehand. February is a rough month for a lot of people. And so we're going to talk a little bit across the board here. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk a little bit about depression and sadness and anticipation and whatever we can cover in this half an hour. So, but before we do any of that, we're going to start with a little exercise with some square breathing. So Kristen, lead us through that.
Thank you so much. And this is what I recommend everybody do every hour, 5 to 6 breaths. And what we're going to do is put our feet on the floor first, pressing into your feet. Inhale for 4 through your nose. You're going to hold for 4. That's really important, that hold. Then you're going to exhale slowly out your mouth like you're cooling soup, or for the kiddos, cooling a cookie. So let's do it together, 2 breaths just to get us started. This helps us get in the present moment, so we're not in the past and we're not in the future. We're right here, right now. It helps us calm the nervous system. So let's press into our feet, being fully present together. Inhale through our nose. Hold. Exhale slowly out your mouth. You'll notice how my shoulders completely dropped. It's like I'm letting the air out of the balloon. I'm letting all that tension, stress, tightness, overwhelm, anxiety, depression out of my body. So my body's not holding it, and that boosts our immune system. So let's do it together one more time. Inhale. Hold. Exhale slowly out your mouth. You can probably almost see my face soften and my eyes soften. And I noticed, Mayor Jenson, you could see the tension just kind of releasing out of your body. So if you hear the kids in the background, you hear the dogs, whatever you got going, you're like, okay, I'm going to let all that stress out of my nervous system so I can be in the here and now. It's the #1 strategy that I'm teaching every single solitary client that comes through the door, and then I'm practicing in my own life. And that transcends to the people around you. That's the whole point of this, is to manage your own energy. So you're not transferring, projecting that onto other people. So I really encourage you, if this is your one takeaway today, to do this consistently throughout your day for the next 7 days and report back how you feel on the next Mental Health Monday.
Yeah, that's, like I said, something so simple as breathing goes such a long way. So I want to encourage you too, if anyone's watching this morning, say hi. Let us know that you're watching. Our friend Jody already beat us to the punch and said hi this morning. Good morning, Jody. Thanks for jumping in. If you have any questions today, we want you to ask those. This is an open space, a free space for you to ask any questions Somebody joked with me this last week, Kristen, that someone said, "Oh, that Mental Health Mondays, is that just your excuse to get some free therapy for a half an hour every other week?" And I chuckle. Absolutely. I need it. I love it. I take advantage of it every other week. So thanks for tuning in, all of our frequent flyers. If you're new this morning, welcome. This is a great chance for you to be you in the comfort of your own home or office and learn something new this morning about mental health. So we really want to pick up where we left off a couple weeks ago. We were talking about boundaries and relationships. But before we get to boundaries, I don't want to jump just to boundaries. I would like to talk a little bit, Kristen, if you wouldn't mind addressing tough conversations. I think that's kind of what led to the boundary conversation. We have a lot of tough subjects in the world right now. I mean, I'm a politician. You can imagine that in itself is really difficult right now. There's just tough national issues going on. There's tough local issues going on. There's a ton of opinions around vaccines and schools and you name it. There's a whole host of opinions. We all have tough conversations with our spouses, with our neighbors, with our friends. Can you maybe help us kind of walk through, Kristen, how to address, because I'm a huge believer in having those tough conversations. Don't hide those tough conversations. Let's have them. How do we appropriately have them? And then we can transition to, if maybe they don't go so well, how do we maybe put some boundaries in place with those people that don't see eye to eye with us? And that's okay too. So take it from there, Kristen.
Here's the one thing I hear a lot from clients is conversations feel like confrontation. Let me say it one more time. I hear a lot of people say conversations feel like confrontation, so they don't want to have them. And the number one thing I see in a breakdown in relationships is not having healthy conversations. That's the number one issue I see in relationships, not having healthy conversations. So we might have grown up where there were not healthy conversations. It was a right, wrong, good, bad, all, nothing. And so it felt very threatening to bring up maybe having a different opinion. Maybe you had a different feeling about something. Maybe you didn't agree and you weren't allowed to disagree. That was a no-no. And so what we do is we end up stifling that down, or we didn't get heard, so we get louder and we get louder and we get louder in order to get heard, in order to be seen, in order to be acknowledged. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to be seen, heard, acknowledged, loved, and accepted. I can tell you that's a universal truth. And if we go into a conversation where we're afraid we're going to make someone mad, we're afraid we're going to upset them, we're afraid we're going to hurt them, we're afraid of them not agreeing with us, we want to be right. Those are all ways that are going to push away connection. And guess what we all want to have is connection. So what people get afraid of is creating discord instead of connection. So how do we have healthy conversations? Well, I'm going to give you the blueprint right now. So get your notebooks out, get a pen out. This is your blueprint for having healthy conversations. One, you have to self-regulate. So I have to check my energy. How activated am I based on the subject at hand? How passionate am I? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm responsible for managing that. So that's number one. Am I taking a deep breath, feet on the floor? Am I watching my tone? So if I'm coming at you with this, your chances are someone's going to back away and not feel safe having that conversation. I have to
we call that coming in hot. We use that at the office every once in a while. Someone's coming in hot. So
yeah,
sorry.
That's right. I like that. I like that. So, a lot of people coming in hot.
Kristen said right there, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
There you go. Right. Let's get all that rapping in there. Check yourself before. Okay, I won't sing. Right. I will scare everybody. But the whole point is, you got to check your energy. Are you amped up already? Are you coming at it like, ooh, I'm going to change this person's opinion? No, we're not going to. We just want to be heard. The other person wants to be heard. If someone's coming at you very intensely, you're going to be in a defensive place. You're going to want to self-protect. So the first thing you're going to do is feet on the floor, take a deep breath, lower your voice. If you want to scream, you're going to whisper. If your face looks like this, because our children, our partners are reading our faces. Guess what? Because we did that as children. We're like, is mom and dad in a good mood or bad mood? Are they upset? Are they not upset? So we learn to kind of read the room, and we're projecting because we think we know what the other person feels. We need to just check our own stuff. We need, instead of checking them, we need to check our own stuff. So take a deep breath, and you're going to use an I feel statement. This is what people get all backwards. They're like, I feel like you. And I'm like, oh, that's an opinion and a judgment. Take a deep breath. I feel with a core emotion in there. Let's take a reminder on what those core emotions are from the movie Inside Out, Disney movie. Recommend everybody watch that as a family so you have shared language. Those core emotions are sadness. We really don't want to go there. And right now, everybody feels sadness on some level, whether it's buried or it's not. Everybody has sadness. These are universal, okay? Fear. Everybody's got fear. It's human. It's part of the human experience. Disgust. People don't like that one because it feels so intense. These are all on a continuum. You know, we're not coming at it at a 10, maybe we're at a 1 or a 2 on disgust. Anger. That's how we get afraid of. Rage. There's a difference between rage, which is at a 10 plus, and anger, which can help us set healthy boundaries, which we're going to get into. And then we have joy, excitement, and if we need earmuffs, sexual excitement, but that's the truth. We are neurobiologically wired for all of those emotions. So when we communicate, we want to use one of those 7 core emotions. Typically, I tell people to choose from typically sadness, which are the most vulnerable. Choose a more vulnerable emotion, and fear. Try on being a little bit more vulnerable. And then you're going to say, I feel sad because I really want to connect with you. And this is taking us towards disconnection and discord. And I really want to move towards connection. That's a way to say it. I'm giving you a cheat sheet. And we start off by the acknowledgement sandwich, which I teach. So thank you for sharing your opinion. And we do not use the word but. X-nay it from your vocabulary. How do you feel when someone goes, I love you, but you... Don't you just feel like you feel slimed, you feel yucky, it feels manipulative, that someone's trying to be. So replace but with and. So thank you for sharing your opinion, and I feel sad because this is moving us towards disconnection, and I really want to connect with you. And it feels so good when we can connect. And if we don't agree on this issue, that's okay. Let's put a pin in it. Okay? We're basically saying we're not going to make each other change each other's minds. That's what we spend so much energy doing. Instead of listening and going, okay, here's where we're at. We're in such a different place around this, and that's okay. Let's put a pin in it so we can go back to connecting again. And this may not be the time to have this conversation. Sometimes we have to decide for ourselves, how much are we going to continue a conversation where we're hitting our head against a brick wall? That's up to us to decide. Now, as adults, we get to decide what our boundaries are. Let's define what boundaries are. Boundaries are what's okay with you and what's not okay. It's that simple. What's okay with you and what's not okay with you. We have rigid boundaries and we have diffuse boundaries. We don't want either one of those. We don't want like controlling boundaries. That's not what that is. We can say, this is what's okay with me. This is not what's okay. That's how you can communicate boundaries. Boundaries come from, if you didn't grow up with someone having healthy boundaries, maybe you had a very controlling environment, that will affect you on how you set boundaries. Maybe you didn't have any boundaries at all. Maybe it was a free-for-all. That will affect you and how you set boundaries. Maybe you never knew what you were going to get. And so you kind of had to be the parent in some ways. You had to kind of make sure your mom or dad was okay. That will affect you and how you set boundaries. So we have to examine, how do I set boundaries and how did I get here? Am I afraid to say what's okay and not okay? Here's the second part of boundaries. People a lot of times push your boundaries. People are like, well, I told them my boundary and they kept going. I'm like, yeah, because that doesn't mean that other person's going to change. Then you get to decide if they're going to keep pushing your boundaries, what's your next one going to be? Are you going to get up and say, hey, thank you for sharing that. And this doesn't feel good anymore. So I'm going to get up and walk away. And when we can talk to each other in a different way, I'm happy to re-engage. See, as children, we didn't get that opportunity.
I was going to chime in there because I wanted about the relationships, I love my good friend and your good friend Rachel Hall said, "No more buts." Great theme for this. No more buts, people. And when it comes to these conversations at the very beginning, and then also transitioning to boundaries now, I think it's so easy to talk. First of all, I've learned so much about how you were raised affects how you are as an adult. And I've learned that a lot over the last year or so, as we talked a lot about mental health and different subjects that we've approached. So much of our childhood is now, how we are as an adults, and how important it is as a parent that I'm projecting correctly to my children as well. But I want to talk a little bit about boundaries and how to communicate those boundaries. I think that's the toughest part. You talked a little bit about how to set boundaries in your head, and I'd love you to touch on that too. But then how do you communicate those? Because that in itself is an awkward conversation, right? How do you communicate those boundaries to those people you're trying to set them with?
A lot of times, and those are great questions, a lot of times we have fear around setting boundaries. We have fear of what the other person's going to think of us. We have a fear of how are they going to react? Are they going to get mad at us? Are they going to get upset? We have a fear of being rejected. We have a fear of being abandoned. We have a fear of just dysregulating somebody. And so we hold back and we don't set boundaries. We don't set healthy boundaries because we're afraid of the other person's response. I cannot tell you hands down how many times that they're like, well, and they predict how the other person's going to react. They're like, well, I'm not going to say that because they're going to get upset. I'm like, well, that may or may not be true. We have to learn how you're going to have a voice in a healthy way, regardless of how the other person responds. Because if you're contingent and you're tied and you're tethered to how the other person responds, you will never be free. You will never be free to say it in a healthy way. So how do we set boundaries? We say, like I said, thank you for sharing that. And I feel sad and afraid when here's one of the things I get real cautious of, because when I say that can cause defense, and I can't be responsible for the other person's feelings. This is a misnomer that I can say it in a healthy way. I can't take responsibility for the other person's feelings. That's up to them to own their own feelings and be able to self-soothe and self-regulate and tend to those. I can't caretake the person through it. That's called codependency. So if I start trying to caretake that person, I'm moving away from my voice. So I can say something like, I feel sad and afraid, to go back to how to say it. I feel sad and afraid because I really want to connect with you. And I feel really like we're moving towards disconnection. What can we do to create more connection right now between us? That's what it would look like. Another way to say is, if you want to be more direct and more clear, is it's okay. It's not okay when you talk to me in that tone of voice. I can't hear you. I start shutting down and I start wanting to self-protect. If you could take your voice down a notch, I can totally hear you better, and I'm happy to re-engage. Those are some examples.
So yeah, that's really good. And because like I said, I think trying to amp yourself up to have that conversation with somebody can be a little overwhelming at times. So trying to think ahead of time what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and what that looks like for you. Can we talk a little bit about our own boundaries? How do we, we talk a lot about how we set boundaries for our relationships with other people. Maybe we're working on ourselves, which you talk a lot about, and trying to set boundaries for yourself that are realistic. And I know that maybe sounds a little crazy, but I'm sure there's been people, there's been instances where people are trying to, protect themselves from certain things or keep themselves, how do we set boundaries in our own life? And how might you tee that conversation? I guess it's with yourself, but how do you tee that exercise up for yourself to go through?
Yeah, I think the first part of this whole exercise is to recognize that we all have defense mechanisms to try to protect ourselves, to kind of try to protect ourselves from that rejection, that hurt, that disconnection, that fear of abandonment. And so we spend a lot of time in that space rather than exploring how do I create connection within myself? So we have to connect here first. And then how do I create connection with other people? We cannot love without boundaries. So let me say it again. We cannot love without boundaries. Love, that means I'm clear on what's okay and what's not okay for me, and I can communicate that. So I can communicate it's not okay to raise your voice at me. I'll be happy to re-engage with you when you can talk to me in a different way. That's clear. That's direct. I'm not mincing words. I'm not tap dancing around it. I'm not sweeping things under the rug. I am being clear and direct. People are afraid to be clear and direct. They're afraid that that will push the other person away. Well, you don't have connection in the first place because you're not being clear and direct. I coach clients all the time in couples that you cannot create connection without being clear on how you want to be treated. So we cannot love well without boundaries. It's like having your yard without clear, boundaries. Like we all have a property line, right? Or if you're in an apartment, it doesn't matter. We all kind of know where our boundaries are, right? We know where our boundaries are. When we don't communicate those clearly, we don't have connection. When we don't communicate boundaries clearly, we do not have connection. And that's simply saying, hey, that's not okay to talk to me like that, or I love you and I care about you. And again, no buts, no always, no never. So I love you, but you always yell at me, or you always, okay, that's defense. What do we want to do? If someone says you always, you never, I want to poke holes in that. I want to go, well, yesterday, or you never take the trash out. I'm like, well, last week I took the trash out, because we want to poke holes in it. We want to defend. So stay away from I want you to ex-nay these from your vocabulary, but always, never, and starting off sentences with you. Please do not start off a sentence with a you. You always, you never, you do. Guess what we want to do is go, no, well, I want to get defensive. I want to protect myself. I want to tell you how that's not true. So those are ways to immediately get defenses up. That's not communicating boundaries. That's judgment. That's opinion. That's not communicating clearly and directly. And that's what we weren't taught. We weren't taught to start with an I feel with a core emotion in there. Again, those 7 core emotions, and then say how you feel and what you want. You want connection. Say it. Say you want connection. So I feel sad because I really want to connect with you. And when we're on our phones, you know how we're all like this now, and we're like, and like, no, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. They're like, no, I want your presence. The greatest gift you can give another human is your full presence. That's all people want right now. They're craving it. We're neurologically wired for it. I implore you to give it to yourself through journaling, through meditation, through prayer, through exercise, movement, yoga, whatever that looks like for you, so you can offer that up to all the souls on this planet that you care about. You can't give a greater gift, but you can't do it if you're not getting present with yourself.
I love that. And one area I want to touch on too, and it's based on, I'm going to get somewhere with this here in a second, so follow me for just a minute. How we relay our feelings, how we communicate our feelings, I think is so important. It's something I've learned so much over the last several years. I am, as you can imagine, sometimes people have thoughts or feelings about me or our leadership style. And oftentimes I see them on social media, for example. And I would just like to, I imagine that's not the best way to communicate how we feel about somebody. So can we talk about maybe some ways that, going back to your presence, and maybe what are some good ways of communicating that? And then what are maybe some bad ways? Like I said, I'll lead on the bad ways with just posting on a wall. What are good ways and what are bad ways to communicate our feelings, our boundaries with someone?
So the first thing is, if you're really triggered by something, don't fire it off an email or a text or post on social right away, please. Like that's I'll tell people, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Like they're so particular. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Write it out in your phone, put it
coming in hot.
Put it in a note, write it out to get it out. Do not send. Do not send. How many times have we gotten so fired up over something we saw, we read, and then we're like, oh, okay, I maybe I should have thought about that, wrote it out, prayed over it, whatever that looks like for you before I sent it. That's number one. I call it doing the crappy, put it down for like, don't even censor it. Don't even edit it, but don't send it. Then go back and use an I feel statement. I've done this many times in my life. I feel sad because I feel afraid because I really want XYZ and I don't feel heard. And would you be willing to sit down with me and so we could share and connect and listen to one another and try to get into the solution rather than the problem? Many people focus on the problem and they don't shift into the solution, and they want the other person to fix it. Well, guess what? If you're not clear and you don't communicate in a grounded way, it's going to get lost in translation between all the intensity, rather than a centered, grounded way to communicate. You can feel when someone's grounded and centered. You can certainly have your own feelings. That's okay. It's what are you doing with them? Are you calling names? Are you cussing at the other person? Are you so intense that you're not able to regulate yourself, that the other person can't even hear you? And a lot of people think they're right, and they come from that place rather than an open dialogue. The minute we come with being right, we've set up a hierarchy in the relationship. And at the end of the day, nobody's right or wrong. Now, that's a big statement. I'm not saying there aren't some rights and there aren't some wrongs. What I'm saying is, if you can come with an open heart and open mind, and if it gets too intense, you say, thank you for sharing. And when we can talk to each other in a more loving way, let's re-engage.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, people are getting really activated over things, which makes sense. You got to come at it. You've got to come at it in a self-regulated, grounded place. This is what I don't see. And then people make up stories about some couples do this all the time, where they're like, he thinks don't contribute, or she thinks that I'm controlling, or whatever the thought is. It's a story that we never check. I like to say the story I'm making up is that you really don't want to hear what I have to say, and you've already shut down. And that may or may not be true. Check it out. Let's see if that is true. And then we can deal with what's in front of us. What people can't do is, if we're not dealing with what's actually in front of us and we're tap dancing around it, we're name calling, we're getting so dysregulated, that's our inner child. That's not an adult at the table. That's a dysregulated inner child. And we have to take ownership for that.
Yeah, one thing that really stuck out to me over the past 6 months that you taught me is the idea we tell ourselves a story to convince ourselves of certain things. And I am just as guilty. I'll get so fired up about something and continue the story in my head, whether it be between Julie Jenson and I, or someone at work, or some issue that we're facing in the community. I'll have myself so fired up on a story that I haven't even sat down and fact checked. And my blood pressure will rise. And so I've really tasked myself of, before that story gets too long, before I get to chapter 2, go and evaluate that story for myself, ask questions, or address it with somebody and say, hey, I'm thinking this, where are you at with this? Or, hey, Julie, are you really, whatever. And we'll have an honest conversation. And that usually stops the story right there. So I would encourage so many people. That's something I've been trying to work on personally for myself over the last year too. So I love Todd Thurston said, I send an email to myself, wait a day, and then decide. Most of the times I delete it. It's a great idea. I've done that before. I've been much better about it recently, but where I'll post something on some social media page. Next morning you wake up, you're like, oh, that just probably didn't sound good. That was not what I was trying to do. So, however, you got to decide for yourself how you do it. But I also get back to, I'm a firm believer in face-to-face communication. So grab a cup of coffee with somebody, talk it through, call them up. So many ways that we need to get back to basics a little bit here on how we communicate with one another. So Kristen, we can go on and on for days. This topic has been awesome. I love how many new viewers we've had. Maybe we need to switch it up on Mondays to go try some different days, because we've had a lot of great interaction. Thank you everyone for joining us. Before we end, I want to make sure, if you are struggling personally, professionally, with your mental health right now, if you're in a bad spot in life, where can you turn right now, Kristen, to get help?
So the suicide prevention hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-TALK. If you don't want to talk on the phone, you can text 741-741. If you're in a domestic violence situation, Prevail here locally is fantastic. They're here in Noblesville, and their hotline is 317-776-3472. So please reach out. There's therapists online, many options. If you need immediate assistance, there's Community North here in Indianapolis, as well as St. Vincent Stress Center. So please do not do this alone. There are resources out there to help you. You are worthy, you do matter, and you are important, even though that shame wants to tell you something different.
Yeah. So stay safe, Noblesville. We'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks here for another edition of Mental Health Monday. Stay safe in the snow, and everyone take care of yourself. Take care of your mental health. You are worth it. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thanks again, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.